Okay? Yeah, after I announce there's no public comment. Okay.
Where are you?
You're old for it.
My daughter calls me, she said, dude, I said, we'll do community meetings. She said, "That's what I
Okay,
do."
Mr. Kraus, we've gotten word that the live stream is up and running, so
Okay.
you can maybe begin.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bolton. Welcome to the Facilities Committee meeting. I understand there is no public comment tonight, so we will go right into the presentation from SiteLogic.
All right. Good evening, everybody. We are going to review the bid results from the scopes of work that we've discussed and developed after you guys gave us the feedback as far as what we want to go out to bid with tonight. So we do have those numbers available to us. And then we'll just touch on a couple updates with the tennis courts in West Rock Hill, and then we should wrap pretty quickly here. So with me tonight, myself, obviously Garrett Lewis, we have Jeff Harris, our lead development engineer, Rick Evans, our president, Carolyn DuBois from K&W, who is the site engineer, and then we have our architect in the back, which is Schrader, Bruce Bechtel, representing them tonight. So we do have a full team here if anybody has questions, but otherwise we'll move forward. Again, like I said, the agenda is the 2021 maintenance projects, those projects that have been bid out and the actual bid results, and we'll talk about those bid results and what they mean. We'll talk about the 2021 tennis court replacement. I don't want to steal the thunder, but the good news is we do believe we'll be able to keep our schedule, even with the design change. We did talk to the permitting agencies and things like that, so actually we're not going to have to go out for a new permit. It was a minor enough change and they accepted that. So that's really good news. Elementary school circulation, high school parking. The one update that I will give tonight that I didn't have Friday for you, Dr. Bolton, was the grant.
Oh, great.
PennDOT and Co are saying March is going to be the award, so it will be mid-March, so we will know. We have gotten some good feedback as far as interaction engagement on the project. They've asked a lot of questions. Our experience is that tends to be a positive. With our 2021 maintenance projects, again, this was the scope of work from page 1, plus the 3 additional items that were moved to page 1 from page 2 and 3, if you remember the handout from last meeting. Where we finished on the 2021 base scope, the bid results were $3,658,552. As far as what that includes, again, the PA intercom systems, the rekeying, the high school auditorium, Siler food service, and then some painting the gym lockers. Those are the bigger scopes of work. You recall the natatorium scopes had a couple options and things like that. And we did send that list out updated today to the district. We also had 3 additional that I'm showing based off the feedback from the last meeting. The high school tennis courts and West Rock Hill, the site, again, the 1.2 and the 2 million are still estimates. They are going to go to the public bid. So we will get public bid results on those and we'll show you what those bid results are. But they'll be estimates until we go out to bid, and I think our bid schedule is April currently. So you'll see those at an April or early May meeting. The big one here tonight, the outstanding package was the DOAS, which I do say it includes bipolar ionization. One thing to remember with DOAS is a big thing about indoor air quality. Ionization is built into those units. So when we talk about COVID and some of those things and what we're doing, COVID-proof facility, ionization technology is a big part of that. So it just mentioned that. Our bid results, $4.4 million on a $5.7 million estimate. That we felt like at the time was pretty skinny the last time we were here. So when we look at the COVID bid results and we talk about what's happening in the COVID bid market, what we're seeing is where a large trade can go and park a large number of people for the summer and provide jobs for an extended period of time, that's bidding incredibly well. That's 20% lower than we expected from a bid. So again, it's 1.2 million less than what our estimate was at the 5.7. So those scopes, that type of work is bidding really well right now. We saw it with the lighting too, but the lighting is a little bit more of a niche. So you see some more modulation there because the LED projects are still happening because the energy savings component. That was really surprising. What we didn't see on the small scopes of work in the base was the GCs do not love the small, minute scopes of work where there's somebody coming in 3 weeks at a time, they're not parking a lot of people. Those still had kind of a higher bid mark. So where there's a lot of savings is on those larger projects right now where we can come and we can place jobs. And that's what we're seeing. So I think where I'm going with that though is that number, I feel like we all felt like was an excellent performance in the bid market, something to consider. But with the high school tennis courts in West Rock Hill, remember, West Rock Hill has a grant attached to it. We're gonna know about that in March before you would make a decision on, bid results and things like that. And then the high school tennis courts, those two projects, I do expect very competitive bids based off of what we saw from the DOAS. It's a similar scenario where you have a couple trades that are gonna come out and be able to park guys out here for 3 or 4 months. There's gonna be a lot of work associated with that. So the length of those projects and the size are probably gonna be pretty appetizing. So I'm hopeful that 20% that we saw in DOAS, does that translate to the full 20? I don't know, we'll see. But I'm very hopeful that those estimates are more than healthy at this point as you make decisions. That's kind of the overview of the package. The total then, the down total, I just totaled all of those packages, so that's the 4 line items, the 11.350808. And just for what we're considering as a summary.
And board, as you remember when we talked about that list, that does touch all 11 buildings. There would be work going on, and actually also the support buildings, so there would be work in all buildings, with 5 of the 11 schools getting a more significant amount of work based on the projects that are being considered tonight.
Yep. Okay. We have so I think the last facilities committee meeting we were at, I was trying to kind of understand what the questions were that were being asked and how to best address them. So we talked to Dr. Bowen on Friday, said, okay, how can we best show numbers to kind of help everybody understand what the proposals are or aren't. So what we have here is we looked at all 3 of the buildings, Grass, Guth, and Seiler. And we're looking on the first column, which is just a straight stick AC install as we see it. That would be a 4-pipe system installed in that building. And we provided estimates for a system like that for those 3 buildings associated. Again, those are estimate numbers. Those middle columns are the DOAS only solution. Those are the numbers that we bid out, that we came back, that make up the 4.4, the hard bid, where we saw those savings, the 4.5. And that's just a DOAS only solution. And then on the right hand, we have an air conditioning plus DOAS. How we would design that would be slightly different. You're seeing if we're looking at just a straight stick AC install, we're probably making a 4-pipe recommendation. If we're looking at the DOAS plus AC, we're looking at a 2-pipe recommendation, which is going to result in some savings because we're not putting as much piping and plumbing into the project. That's a big tie-up in those jobs. So you see how those numbers kind of move to the right accordingly. If you have the 4.5 investment in the DOAS, you can expect about another 8.6 if we went to the full AC.
And you'll notice the air conditioning with DOAS, the way we would apply it is less than the full air conditioning because we have we can take the advantage of using the pipes you have in place on the heating side. The DOAS gives us the ability to not need larger pipes than a normal chilled water system would need. So we can reuse the existing pipes, just retool the controls and be off and running and not have to spend that extra money. That's why it's actually less than a full air conditioning solution.
And again, those numbers account for the DOAS plus the AC, so the 2.5 isn't in addition to the 1.3. It would be the 2.5 minus the 1.3 would net out for the additional add for AC. So in that case, it would be 1.2 at Grass. At Guth, we'd be looking at a little bit more just based off the layout, and 1.2 to 1.3 again at Seiler is the differential.
And that's savings, because obviously it's counterintuitive to show that doing both air conditioning and DOAS is cheaper than doing air conditioning. But that's because of the 2-pipe versus the 4-pipe and the amount of work that's done that you talked about.
Based off of the design recommendations, yeah.
Right. So if we look at Grass, DOAS is 1.3, the air conditioning in DOAS is 2.5.
That's correct.
If DOAS was done first, and then 2 years from now, you wanted to add air conditioning, I understand that there'd be a cost increase, but is it still going to be roughly that 1.2 on top of plus whatever the market has increased? Or is there something about doing it at one time that makes it even more economical?
I think anytime you're buying an economies of scale, you have to consider the economics of that. But what we have at play right now, obviously, is the COVID bid market. I mean, that number currently, the 4.5, I don't think we'll see that in 2 years on the DOAS. So I think at this point, it would probably be, overall, it definitely would be cheaper and more beneficial for you to do them in piecemeal, just that we could take advantage of this bid market.
There'd be some redundant work in there, like tearing ceilings out. If you're doing it as a standalone, and you just did the DOAS, we're gonna tear the quarter ceilings out. If we came back, we may end up tearing some of those same ceilings out. There's a little bit of an extra work, not a ton.
Okay.
I think the fluctuation in the bid market is probably a much more significant factor.
Right.
That's my point.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Eric,
Oh, yep.
the DOA's number on that page is 4.5 and the page before it is 4.4.
That number there, we forgot to carry it to the front page. That's the right number.
This is actually correct.
Oh, my bad.
That's right, that's right. Yeah, I didn't catch it myself.
4.4?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
that's my fault.
That's all right, it's fun.
We do have,
Sorry, can you go back real quick?
To which, that one?
So, how is the, maybe you already, I'm sorry if you already answered this. The air conditioning DOAS together is cheaper than the air conditioning by itself?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the air conditioning in column one, if you were
Okay,
doing all air conditioning, has a four-pipe solution. In other words, chilled and hot water, or supply and return on the chilled water side, supply and return on the hot water side, so it's four pipes. On the air conditioning in DOAS, we would be able to keep your existing two pipes that you have circulating heating the water to all the units, and be able to run chilled water in the cooling season, hot water in the heating season, save a lot of money on ripping a lot more ceilings down, putting that extra set of pipes in for chilled water that you would do in the full-blown air conditioning solution on the left.
and how do these three sets of numbers compare to your original three sets of numbers from a while ago? Because I don't remember that being the case before.
We couldn't find those numbers, honestly.
Yeah, and I went back and did a fresh look based on the information we just got from the contractors, and we repriced air conditioning, and then now that we have our DOAS numbers, we'll be able to look at the DOAS plus the two-pipe solution in current terms. So even if we had them,
Well,
those
I
numbers are
think-
updated.
what we were looking at was a number that had been given by a previous contractor or potentially design firm as part of that their study. I think they had an all AC number in there that we were maybe using as comparison if we ever talked
I
about
don't
that.
think so, because you were suggesting that you wouldn't install air conditioning the same way that they were. Because they were using completely different.
Agreed, but I don't think we cannot find revised estimates. We definitely didn't present them to the board, and if we ever did present them in a meeting, I don't know that it was a swag. So I'm not,
We did have a slide that showed all three numbers. There was a slide for air conditioning, DOAS, and then both of them together. And that number wasn't less than the other number in our last one. That's why I just thought it was interesting that I would expect them all to be a little bit lower because of COVID, but I would expect them to all be somewhat equally lower, not switching which order, if that makes sense.
yeah.
We have a high confidence level in
Yeah.
these numbers, I can say that.
And when we looked at it before, I'll go back and try to find those numbers again, but if the numbers you saw before were higher on the right, then maybe we were making the assumption, we're gonna put when you do a full air conditioned building, you could use DOAS and still go with four pipe.
Well, time out. But if
Absolutely.
you're looking at our DOAS estimate, what she's saying would have held true though. So, I mean.
Yeah, that's correct, that's correct.
It's a 20% differential from our estimate that we were holding for DOAS from the time that we would have
That's
presented those numbers. It would have been more expensive at that point.
That's correct.
Well, right, but wouldn't they all be 20% higher then? Wouldn't they all have gone down 20% then? Or are you saying these
They
air
have,
conditioning?
that's the differential that you're pointing out.
Total's down 20%.
Yeah, it's roughly 20%.
Understood. My point was that air conditioning by itself wasn't more expensive than air conditioning in DOAS in the last example. So if they all went down 20%.
Right, but here's the deal. Those are estimates, the first column and the third column are estimates. The middle column is a bid result now. So we're not estimating a 20%, we're still gonna estimate them, based off of how we would have estimated a project,
It's an actual.
even when we came that.
So those two air conditioning numbers would likely be 20% lower? Is that what you're saying?
If you bid them now,
If they were bid now,
yes.
but we don't have, in this presentation, we don't have that luxury, we're not bidding them.
Right.
We're not bidding
So
the
that's-
columns 1 and 3,
that's
so
the
we're not gonna
difference.
tell you it's gonna be 20% less, because we didn't bid it.
That middle column was 5.7 until this meeting.
Yeah.
So if that was still 5.7, then what you're saying would hold true. We're not estimating them for 20%. If you want to make that assumption, we can make that assumption right now here in this room that they would come back 20%. But again, that would depend on the decision-making timeline, the bidding process, and when we went to bid. In 6 months, we may still be in a competitive bid environment. In a year, we may not be. I don't know. It just depends on how COVID continues to impact the economy.
Okay.
For the next slide, we looked at the LED lighting, this was provided at, these are the numbers that have been provided, but they're just for Guth and South, because that was the question that had arisen with the group on Friday. And so we're just reminding you all of the totals for LED interior with dimming, and then the exterior totals for the LEDs at those two buildings, if that was something that you wanted to consider. What we wanted to point out, if this is a decision that you wanted to make as far as whether or not LED was something you wanted to include in a budget process, we can go to contract on LED lighting because we have those bids at any time. So you could make those decisions based off of how other bid results came in, maybe at West Rock Hill or with the tennis courts.
And
So
Mr.
that's why we're showing that number again, just so that it's something for you all to consider depending on what your overall budget or allowance is for the summer maintenance project.
And Mr. Dahlberg, we talked about these two schools because they're both covered by the same provider. Is that accurate? And they're the only two covered by that provider. Can you remind me who that provider is?
Yeah,
That's Percy Barrow?
Percy Borough. So so we were looking at that in terms of an example. There is an asterisk under the interior south. Is that just a carryover, or does that mean something?
No, there's no carryover, so that, ignore that out.
It doesn't mean
What we
anything.
did was we
Perfect.
copied and pasted.
Right, that's what I was making sure. Making sure there wasn't some fine print I couldn't see.
Very small.
It's in micro font. It's right there.
Carolyn, I don't know if you want to talk at all about the tennis court replacement project, but anything that's changed. I mean, the schedule was the big update for everybody in this room. That was the thing that we talked about, had concern about last meeting, whether or not we could maintain our intended schedule with the design changes going from the stack to, the 7 across. Is there anything else that,
Really nothing else to add, other than just the good news that we were able to get the plan modified, get it resubmitted to the Conservation District, went through a round review, administratively complete, so it was ready to go to technical review. So in other words, we were able to do the change and not miss a day in the schedule. So that's, very briefly, all good news.
And Carolyn, we really appreciate that in
Yes.
terms of that piece. A couple things to keep in mind in terms of to orient where you are. The courts, there are currently 6 courts that kind of sit in that middle area where the 5 middle courts are now. This would stretch out a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right. What it would cost us, and I'll put that word in quotes, there are parking spaces to the left there right now. So if you go up the road to the stadium, there's about a dozen parking spots immediately to the right along the tennis court wall, the current tennis court fencing.
Mm-hmm.
That new court that you're seeing all the way to the left spills into that parking area. I'm assuming that's that little line we see
that's correct.
up above it.
That line that projects up, that's the edge.
Yeah, up
Yeah.
above it,
Yeah.
right. And then there's new walkway there in terms of being able to go next to the tennis courts and things like that. To the right-hand side, it doesn't cost us anything. There isn't anything there, and that access road that they're showing, which is the road that would lead basically from north up to the stadium, had to be redrawn a little bit, but it will still exist. It will still allow us to get vehicles up there and do what we need to on that side. It doesn't preclude anything with the pole barn or with the parking that we're talking about eventually in that area. This doesn't do anything with that. Those things are still possible. Okay?
We're able to, build these courses and get it done and keep that existing storage shed there as well until it's time to do that.
And then West Rock Hill, again, just wanted to update the grant. This was what we submitted for the multimodal transportation plan program. Again, that award will occur in March, which is a percentage of this job. The direct percentage has changed a little bit because we've had to make some modifications as far as when they've come back, what's in the job, what's not, what the grant will pay for. They've really gotten through that with a fine-tooth comb, which is why I feel positive about that they're truly considering this project. So it's ebbing and flowing, but when we have a final number as far as the award, we'll certainly present that in March, of what that could potentially be. I don't know, as far as any changes that you want to point out tonight, that was the big one that I wanted to address, was just the grant application, as far as how that's going to impact the overall fund balance and stuff like that. But
The plan itself hasn't changed. Where we are is with permitting. Everything has been submitted and we have received back first round of comments from the Conservation District, and actually they just emailed us a few comments, which is a good sign. So we had those comments, and then we got some comments from the township as well. And what we're gonna do is address those and resubmit everything all at the same time. And then the site lighting plan, which is required by the municipality, we will be receiving those plans this week, the end of the week. And other than that, we're just moving along, with the permitting process. Everything seems to be going pretty well thus far.
And the site lighting was included in this project for the grant because of the LED component, that they would reimburse that. So if we do receive a grant, we move forward with this, there will be LED exterior lighting there on that, in that site, so. Pointing that out. That is what we had for the board tonight. If there's additional questions, we're all here.
That's on hold.
The other slides are projects that we've seen.
Yeah,
Yep.
So, yeah.
So I saw where you, the DOAS numbers went down 1.1 million. Did the other numbers go down that you handed out for the other projects?
No, so when we talk about that, as far as the bid results for the 2021 maintenance project, so slightly higher than actually the estimate. The reason for that being that we have a lot of sites, we've got small projects. I don't think it's as valuable to the contractors because they're not able to park a lot of bodies on site. It's not the kind of work that's gonna sustain a big number of jobs over the summer or this year. So that wasn't as competitive as far as the bid results. Now we couldn't do necessarily an apples to apples because we did bring some stuff up from page 2 that was on page 1 in the past. So as far as the elevation in the bid results, it's slightly higher. Percentage, maybe 10 on some of the trades. I mean, what was the work that specifically was a little bit of?
The low voltage
Oh.
came in pretty much at budget. But
If you look,
the GC
following through on what happened with the DOAS, if you look through all the buildings and add up the clock and PA, okay, because the electrical contractor looks at that as a big project because it's across all your buildings. If you look at the estimate versus that, I think it might be different by $5,000. So it was very, very competitively bid. All the one-offs like the masonry work that we're doing at the high school,
That
pool
stuff was
work,
all-
it's not big scale stuff, and it's fairly complicated work, and we can't get a lot of people interested in it. We advertised to 8, 9 guys and got 2 responses as an example. So those numbers reflect the fact that, like Garrett said, they can't come here and park 30 guys.
They're not
for
job
6 months.
systems.
They're just,
They're really just not for a contractor.
Yeah.
They're just not a big enough piece of work. But though we did provide for the board an updated column today that shows the bid results for the scope of work. And then last time we were here, we had those estimates, so you can see the discrepancies and where they occurred specifically.
Okay, I forget, how many buildings are we doing the intercom systems in?
I thought it was.
All of
them.
Yeah.
Every building
it's all-
is
I would think that would be a big enough project that I would have thought we would see.
That's what he
something
was saying. The
there.
low voltage performed well, so PA
You said it
intercom
was up,
system.
what, 5,000 or something is what you said?
it was up by $5,000
Yeah.
Yeah,
with over almost $200,000. In other words, the estimate and the bid was competitive.
We're very competitive.
Very competitive.
right, I'm just surprised with a large scale project like that that's across the whole district that we wouldn't have seen the same kind of 20%
What's that?
savings that you're seeing everywhere else in every other
But
project.
we're talking 200,000 versus many
Right,
millions.
right, it's just,
So
It's
it's
large
small,
scale
isn't
in that it's touching every building, but dollars and cents wise, it's not a large project. It's still less
it's
than,
only small.
yeah.
Is one company doing all of it?
Yeah.
Don't know that yet.
Well, our intent would be to award one contractor, yes.
Well,
But
based on the bids, is it cheapest to go with one company?
again, when we descope the bids, that's something that we'll have to decide as far as what's the most efficient.
I started the conversations with the bidders, and we needed a final decision before I can finish that conversation. And it might be that there might be 2 people, because when we asked for the bid, they gave us one number for all that work district-wide. I've since gone to them and said, go to work and give me a breakdown for both the PA line item per building, clock line item per building, so I can compare the contractors.
And why that happens is because it's more advantageous for us to bid every building to every contractor, hoping that they'll all be sharp, but we get that per building breakout, and where there's discrepancies, then we can go back and negotiate with those contractors. But what we try to do is take the median, we'll take our risk on that, and then we've got to either back one of them down, or we've got to bring 2 guys in and supplement them.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of the advantages of being able to bid this way, is we can slice and dice the best parts of their bids. Yeah.
Mr. Cormack, any questions?
I'm fine, thank
Okay,
you.
just checking on you. Brian, anything? Okay.
Now, the parking lots, the West Rock Hill and, the tennis courts, those, we have numbers?
Those go to the public bid, and they'll bid in April, based off of permitting and the design schedule. So those are April bids, and we'll be back in April to review those at the board meeting. But they'll be public bids, so you'll see the full public bid, and we hope that they'll perform competitively. I think they should, based off of the type of work
Right.
they are.
Yeah, because we, that's something that I've seen in other boards where that has gone
Performed well.
significantly down.
Yeah.
From what was estimated, so I
Yeah.
would hope that we see that kind of savings in those projects.
Yeah, and I started there tonight, like, I do expect the site work to be very competitive.
Mhm.
Is it gonna be 20%? I don't know. That's awesome if it is, but it should be, those numbers are very healthy, and I told Sean that as far as responsible budgeting, they're very responsible for planning for your purposes today. And that's why, if we do have a big discrepancy in savings and there was some type of fund that you made available, we could supplement that with LED lighting or
Mhm.
whatever, however you might want to spend that money, keep it for next year, whatever.
What is the timeline for making decisions about what to move forward on?
They
some of
would,
these projects?
we have committed to them that we are going to get them best decisions by the February board meeting, so that they can go out in March, right? Isn't that correct, in terms of where we need to be?
Sure.
In terms of that piece. So if you remember from the last meeting, the recommendations from Mr. Harper, working with Mr. Delbert and myself, are the base maintenance project scope. That's when we move things from page 2 to page 1,
Mhm.
right? So that's at 3.6, as well as the tennis courts in West Rock, which puts us in the ballpark of 7 million for this summer. Hopefully a little less than that, based on those other bids. Which is why we started looking at lighting, because that's the cheaper piecemeal stuff that if you choose to do a little bit, if you
Right.
wanted to hit a certain number. So that's where we are in terms of a recommendation. We feel as though 20 million over the next 3 summers is about where the target we want to be. And so as we look at the large term pieces, and that's part of what we'll talk about in March in terms of that longer range in terms of what it looks like over the next 5 years. But for one summer, we were looking at about that $7 million number, which gives us those top 3
Yeah.
items that are there. Remembering that first item is about 40 things. So-
Right,
Yeah.
it's a lot of
And
work.
based on- I guess I would assume the administration is kind of slicing and dicing those numbers too, as far as
Mhm.
what came back, and, so you'll let us know if if based on some of those numbers or breakdowns, if there's things that you think, you know what, maybe we should just wait on this because it doesn't seem to be making sense right now versus what you think should move forward.
And like they said, we got those reports, and so we're able to send them out to
Yeah.
the board, so we can send them to everybody for you to be able to look at that as well. But yes, in terms of our feedback. So,
Right, I would be
yep.
interested to hear if, Mr.
Mhm.
Harper, when he's looking through all of that, has any different recommendations based on those specific numbers.
Good.
Okay.
Very good.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
team.
you very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Gentlemen.
Right.
And lady?
Any questions? you can
Sure.
keep going.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. Just back into this. Okay. We'll give this just a second. All right. So, next item we have on our agenda is obsolete items. Mr. Daubert?
Thanks, Mr. Rupp. Under obsolete tonight, we have the Sellersville Library meeting log. We'll put that on public surplus. For the high school, we have an acid storage cabinet that is in bad shape. So we're gonna scrap that. It's corroded pretty bad, no longer usable. Over in the maintenance department, we have some equipment that we are going to pass on or get rid of. Push blower, field paint liner, push mower, and another push mower. They're all gonna go to scrap based on their condition. And we have a tractor with a front end loader, and a tractor, another tractor, that will both go to public surplus.
Okay.
And then at the transportation department, we have, 3 two-way radios, that are no longer repairable, and we will recycle them.
Okay. Thank you. Any questions, board members? Okay. Then we'll move those forward.
The John Deere one that's, not in use and old.
How can I get that now? How can I bid on that?
Well, I know, just John Deere, I know, old is,
They do
is
get old,
kind
yeah.
of different from
They
one
get
person
old.
to another, I guess, but I've just heard those things, last forever. Are we gonna, I guess that one would go to public surplus?
Yes,
And you
yes.
expect to get some money back for that?
Correct.
So, but we aren't using it because we don't need it because we have other equipment, or?
Right, you have other equipment, this one's kind of in the garage, not needed, there's better equipment already at that location, so it's just in the way, and better try to get a little bit of money for it.
Time to move it on.
It's that time.
It is a 1991 model,
Ooh.
so we have gotten a lot of.
And
30 years.
They were a little better built back then, though, weren't they?
Not for 30 years. Not for 30 years.
Mr. Gilbert, what site are we using to post these on? Is it a site that we use?
Yeah, it's,
Is it Municipid or?
no, I can get that for you.
Okay, just curiosity on my part.
Yeah, it's,
I want to park it next to Bob's house.
okay,
Like everything else you want.
yeah. And Jackie's at home taking minutes tonight, so she's probably trying to ESP that to me right now.
Okay,
But
that's fine.
she uses it, but
No.
It's not coming to me.
Okay, all right. All righty. Are there questions, board members, comments?
All good.
All good, we'll move them all forward.
Yes, please.
Okay, and that brings us to the end of this Facilities Committee meeting. Our next meeting is scheduled for March 8th.
Do we need public comments?
What's that?
Is there any, I think it's that public.
Kelly, was there any public comment that came in during that time? Okay,
Just under that.
good catch. I lost my trusty advisor.
I saw you, I was like, I don't know if I have any.
There is no public comment.
All right, well, there's no public comment, so that will adjourn the Facilities Committee meeting. Okay,
Is everybody okay if we move right into finance?
sure.
All right. Let's go to finance, and since we don't have any public comment, we'll just move right into the agenda.
That was easy.
Mr. Delbar, contracts for approval.
Okay, thank you. We have a few contracts tonight. We start with Learnwell Educational Services, for a student, $48.50 per hour. We have Learnwell, contracts usually at least one every month, but this is for a student in a medical facility, which is normally what we have, used Learnwell for. The next one is Wood Services. This is another educational services for a student. The cost is $363.35 per day. This is 111 days. This school year for $40,331. The next one is Lakeside Educational Network. This is an addendum to our current agreement for counselors, and this is adding 4 hours per week of counseling services. And the additional fee is $4,750 for the remainder of this year for that 4 hours per week. The next one is J Delta Productions. This is for video production of the North Middle School musical. And the dates there are, include the show dates and the weather delay dates. That's why the span is from March 5th to March 13th. That cost is $1,800, and the Draw Club is paying for that. Next contract is Montgomery County IU 23. This is for the Title I Equitable Share Services. And this contract runs from February 2021 to February 2024. So this would be Title I services for students that are in the private school in Montgomery County, which is Southwood.
There's a couple others that are non-profits that fall into the category depending on eligibility.
Thank you. And the last contract, we just added in the last day or so is for the Bucks County Community College to regain the student parking there. Since we're going back 5 days a week, parking will be redistributed, and we need that lot over there and the lot at the church. So we'll go back to the $4,500 for the second semester. We did, our bill was $4,500 for the first semester. They gave us a credit because we stopped using it before the end of the first semester, so thank you to them for that.
And they've already committed to staying all virtual through the end of the year? So they don't need it?
Yeah, the community college is virtual all year. Yeah. That was a little different location this time. The first semester, we were right behind the giant parking lot. We're going to be on the other side of the giant building and the parking lot over there because of the testing site and the COVID testing site that's at the community college.
Gotcha. Yeah, they want to keep us separate, I guess.
Yeah, so, yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
Keep it separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
That's the
have
only
we,
thing.
one of the things, have we looked at, I guess one of the concerns I hear from students is that they shouldn't have to pay the same parking fee if they're parking all the way over there compared to if they're parking right here. Are we changing that fee? No? All right, just checking. And then Lakeside for the extra council, then is that based on need? Is there essentially 4 extra hours that they're?
Dr. Bolton, do you?
Let me catch back up.
Sorry.
All right, why don't you move on to the next thing, and I'll look at the Lakeside contract.
All right, I have another question, maybe a redirect. So things like the J. Delp Productions, are we still including a force majeure clause?
Yes,
Okay,
that one I know.
okay. Good.
Okay.
And I'll assume that Lakewood Services and Learnwell, the rates are the same as we've been getting, right? The per diem rate or the hourly rate, yeah.
Lauren Will is, yes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, my notes don't give me a good enough answer to what you're asking about Lakeside, so we'll have to send the whole board that response. Okay,
Okay.
we'll look at the Lakeside contract and get better information to you.
Okay. Yeah, I just figured since we're adding 4 extra hours, there had to be some
Yeah,
reason why it was
Yeah.
more.
Okay.
All right, next is the school start time transportation study.
Yay. All right.
Dr. Marchak.
Dr.
You're up.
Ravarchik. Movie time.
Now, if I use it correctly, that'll be correct. We'll see how it goes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me the time to present this information. So as you know, the part of the 2-year study of the school sleep, the sleep and school start time study, we have done a lot of homework as a committee, and now we're getting to the nitty gritty. And one of the biggest pieces to a study of this context is the transportation. Because transportation is the key to making sure that we are able to do anything if we're going to move forward with changing school start times. So we explored 2 different companies as part of our transportation consulting study and looking at the bell time scenarios that will be part of that study. Let's see. Oh, did I hit it twice?
Mm-hmm.
I did.
Yes, sir. Go back one. Uh-huh. Oh, no, you're good.
Just a little delay.
Just touch the screen.
Oh, sure.
Dr. Bolton.
Let's see. Oh, the math worked better. Perfect, thank you.
Be the one to mess it up.
Go back one, there we go. All right, so, as part of this process, we reviewed two, as I said, transportation consulting companies. The first one was Transpar, and what they were looking to do, in the sense of a study for us, was the development of runs and routes required to operate within the 3 developed scenarios that we put together. That was in that presentation earlier in the year where we looked at the 3 different scenarios that the committee had come to a conclusion of looking into further. They would look at turn-by-turn directions, meaning the stop evaluation and the placement of adjustments of stops within the transportation routing. The balancing and redistribution of our ridership if necessary. So looking at the ridership of the buses and determining the amount of percentage capacity our buses are actually taking on in each of the buildings, with how many people are riding the buses compared to getting picked up or walking in those scenarios. And then provide a final routing summary overview. And that came in at a firm fixed price of $10,653, as you can see. We did consider this company. We went into depth with them about what our expectations were. Jess Krause was involved throughout the process. We were very appreciative because Jess has that background knowledge to be able to ask the right questions. And as we went further into asking them questions, what we found out was there wasn't going to be any routing of our system. They were basically just going to look at our routing and give us determinations of whether it would be efficient, whether it would work. So that's why Transpar kind of get put into the backseat of our our proposals, because then we went on to Versatrans, which Versatrans is the company that we actually have our routing system through. And when we started talking to them at first, we weren't getting a clear idea of whether or not they were going to be including the routing component of the buses. But as we got more into conversation with them, and as part of their package, we found out that basically they're going to use our district routing system, and they will manipulate the actual routes within the system. So it's called a ghost account, that they will go into and actually fix the routes to make it so it fits each of the scenarios. And as part of that, they'll look at the financial impact that would have on each of the scenarios, the impact that is going to occur for the sports teams, to their practices, their competitions, if they need to be off campus, in those scenarios, the impact of district community groups, which is very minimal in the sense of our district, because community groups are really they're not using our fields, they're not really using our buildings until after hours, so it has minimal impact, but they will include that. The understanding of sleep and hygiene and time management, that's information that we would share with the routing company, so they have a better understanding of why we're doing this and what we're looking for. And then obviously the big one here, considering a 2-tier system, busing option versus a 3-tier. Meaning whether or not we could go with keeping the kind of the traditional elementary students, middle school students, and then high school students, or if we look to an elementary option and then combining a middle school and high school routing option. So those are really important in that process. The scenario that will be created were for options 3, 4, and 4B, which were part of that previous presentation, but looking at basically that 7:45 start and the 8 o'clock starts with a 2-tier and 3-tier system. So they're going to look at each of those options down below where it says each option identified the 3-tier current and the 2-tier preference. So again, they're going to build the routes for those options within the system itself and determine, do we need more buses, would we need more drivers, based on all the information they're collecting to better understand what would best work for us as a district. You got it, Mr. Cross? I'm afraid to hit it and then...
I'm afraid to intervene.
Oh, there we go.
It got nervous.
I think it skipped one again.
Yes, sir.
It's you.
It's got it. I was gonna just drag it back one. Yep.
Thank you, Dr. Bolton. And as part of, again, this is continuing Versatrans. like I said, their package got bigger and bigger what they were offering us in the endpoint. To analyze the runs per tier on the current and proposed scenarios, the analysis of number of vehicles. So Jessica Kraus is going to be supplying to Versatrans all the operational costs it is for us as a district to them to understand how many buses we need in our fleet, what is the average yearly cost to keep them in running order, and how often we turn over to new vehicles. They will also do an analysis of proposed arrival departure times to achieve the times for the buses in each of the scenarios. An analysis will be performed on the public school regular education students as well as the special needs students. And this gets complicated because you have all your runs for regular ed students, but there's a lot of runs for the special needs students that are in particular of going to outside placements or their need of particular transportation to meet their needs overall, and it's part of their IEP. And the other part of this, which this was Transpara was not including that analysis of the regular and special ed, and they were also not including our private parochial. As you know, if you've been over to Grasset anytime about 8:30 in the morning, you will see a lineup of transfers that occurs. So that wasn't going to be part of that study. So that's why this is so important, because we have so many transfers that occur, as well as transportation we're providing for outside the district for whether it's homelessness or foster care. So they're looking at about 64 hours to complete the project, at coming in about right around $11,200. What?
And I assume with changing the start times and how that affects the technical school and busing for that would all be taken into consideration?
All part of that. That's that alternative runs that would need to occur. And Mr. Ott has already made that connection for us to talk to the technical school to be sure that all that information is included. So as part of the study, Elise Mora is the senior implementation consultant, so she would be conducting the study. As you can see, she has a wealth of knowledge. She has 15 years in the Albuquerque Public Schools, routing for over 90,000 students of 3,800 transported daily. She has conducted on-site and online client training. She's a large district specialist, which I was happy to hear, because of having 7,000 students, we are considered a larger district in that sense and how that all operates. And then obviously these are some of the other things that she's done: redistricting, bell-time studies, of course, routing efficiencies, implementation, and training for staff.
Now, will we inadvertently end up finding some ways to do a better job even at our elementary level that likely isn't going to be affected just because we're going through this whole thing?
So no matter what, we're looking to get efficiencies out of it, whether we change our times or not. The whole point of the study is that you even find efficiencies within your normal routing system as it stands currently. Whether that's shaving off 2 or 3 minutes, we had talked about that process. You know, we explained to Elise that we have 2 levels of start times and end times for our elementary, where they're staggered. She would look to see how can we make those across the board at the same time, if possible. And all based on those evaluations and the analysis of the routes that are in the system. Previous experience and background: the bell time scenario analysis and routing deployment model. They've conducted the strategic and operational planning, the fleet modeling, meaning the number of buses, the actual vehicles on hand, and that replacement analysis. The organizational staffing and alignment to make it more functional. The staff who are coming in and actually driving the buses to determine when would be the best time and how many you're going to need. Are we overstaffing? Are we understaffing? Obviously, we kind of laughed at this one because we're not understaffing at this point. We're just trying to find people. Obviously, it's difficult at this time.
It'd be good to have some people.
It would. And then the financial allocation modeling. So they will give a full report on the financial allocation and what it looks like and how we're handling our funding to deliver the route that we are currently using, and then what it would look like for those options. And then the contractor management assessment oversight. So she would oversee the whole project. She would meet with us multiple times. Sean happened to be on the phone call for a couple of those, and it was very confirming to hear from her that she said this is a partnership and that she's looking to get as much information as possible. So how to be successful with bell time changes, she just gave us some information, looking at our policies and the effective cost and expected services, optimizing our routing schedules, the maximization of our assets and resources, the fleets, the number of buses we have, and to uncover areas that operate more efficiently and use those free resources to improve services in other areas, such as air conditioning. So this would be the work plan approach that she proposed. Obviously using the district routing system, looking again at the financial, the school sport teams, the district community, and the 2-tier versus 3-tier. Looking at the scenarios, defined start and end times, again using 2 and 3-tier preferences. And then the analysis of the runs per tier, the number of vehicles transporting regular ed and special ed, and again the private and parochial. So it just kind of synthesized it further down. So the timeline of reporting, basically from the approval, if this plan is approved and we go with this contractor, she said that it would take anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks. She was very optimistic, closer to the 4 weeks because of the amount of information we provided to her already. We've given her a lot of data that she can easily dig into and start analyzing our services. The commencement of the contract would start with the assigned scope of services after the February board meeting. So we would get a report of the proposed arrival and departure times, the financial impact, and the notes of any current and newly created timing conflicts. And then the recommendation. So as a group, talking with Jess and Sean and a couple of, we've actually had the students as part of understanding what we're looking at when it comes to the transportation model or the study. We are recommending that Versatrans would be the company to conduct the study, look at again those data collection, data quantity assurances, synthesizing that data, and that says into Transpar's deployment model. It's actually ours, it's Versatrans. And the current state route development and bell tier assessment, and then alternative scenario review for operational and cost analysis. And then again, we would get a final summary report at the very end that would give us all this information. And that was another reason I wanted to go back, and I apologize that's in there, the synthesis of data into Transpar's deployment model. We basically, Jess was explaining it, they would have to take all of our routing that's in Versatrans already and carry it over in the Transpar one. So additional cost and additional time to transfer all our routes into their system. Where Versatrans, it's already theirs. They own it, and we own it, and it's part of their system, so it's more easily accessible to them is when they go in and do the study. And that's
So based on the timeline then, you would hope that a proposal or a recommendation will be coming back in April meetings?
April timeline, yes. So a lot of the information that the committee has done already, all that analysis of bell schedules and all those other factors have been looked at as part of the study, are already being put into a project report. So this is kind of that missing link in regards to the final steps of what we would need to better understand.
Now, how much are we able to manipulate this information in the future, in future years? Like, they're gonna give it all back to us and break it all down, but obviously over the next several years, things are going to change. Are we going to have the ability then to be able to manipulate some of those scenarios ourselves?
Yeah, so one of the things that they explained, that Elise explained, because that question came up later with myself and Jeff in a meeting, meaning the ghost account that they're creating the routes in.
Yeah.
We wanted to make sure that we had access to them afterwards, no matter what. So if we did have to make slight changes, if we had to make a tweak here or there, we would easily have the ability to go in and do that. Or if we ended up 3 months later saying, you know what, option 3 really wasn't the way to go, option 4B is, the routes would be already established in there and we would have those in place already. So that would be time, obviously a time saving, huge time savings, especially for Jess and Rose and Nancy, who all do all the routing in the system, that we wouldn't have to concern ourselves with starting all over again, for sure.
Right, and then if you tweak one thing, everything else will work itself out in the system rather than you having to try to do that all manually.
Correct. And we even talked about it, and Sean, I think you were on the phone call when we talked about this. Even if you get to a point where you're saying elementary to start at 8, you want them to start at 8:50. But because of the efficiencies you find, even 3 minutes, now we're gonna start them 3 minutes earlier when that first child gets picked up, because we found efficiencies within the routing system. It will automatically make those changes as you go through and adjust the route.
Yeah, and I like that we're using our existing data. It's a vendor we already use. They can piggyback our existing data in our system. I like the ghost account because to me, that just makes it easy.
Yeah. It definitely makes it much easier, and as I said, as we explored the two different vendors, we were finding that, I don't want to say misled, but we were misunderstanding what they were actually going to offer us in the end. And when we found out they weren't actually giving us routes, they were just giving us analysis of routes, it turned out to be apples to oranges. So,
Okay.
and even though this is a slight increase, that amount to set routes in a system, it takes a lot of work.
It almost defeats the purpose if they don't, right?
Right.
Correct. Right.
It's analysis without the answer.
Right.
Right.
And then
Exactly.
you can't do anything with it moving forward. It
Right,
just
it would
seems
still all
like,
be on us as a district to end up
Right.
putting the routes in and just
Right.
take a lot of time.
It would be an enormous amount of money just in the resource.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right, and then, after they give you all of that information, if you didn't have those accounts and these kids leave and then these other kids come, I mean, you're gonna have some changes to that. It's not gonna be exactly what they put in there, so.
Right.
That'll be good. All right. Anyone have any, are you good with this?
I'm good with it.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Yep,
All right,
thank you, Dr. Robarche.
Thank you, Dr. Roach.
Thanks.
All right, next is the Bucks County Intermediate Unit budget, programs and services budget.
Okay, I will give you the highlights of this, and then Mrs. Bennett, if you want to go into any detail, you feel
Okay.
more than welcome to. But anyways, the IU programs and services budget, according to Pennsylvania code, it has to be approved by the sending school district, or the school districts in that IU each year. And each year, in February, we bring this budget to you. This year, the budget is $2,171,414. The program and services budget is a very small part of our IU. Our IU is huge, with millions and millions and millions of dollars total budgeted. But this is just a very small part, which has to come to the sending sending school districts in that IU for approval. This year, the increase is 3.04%. The great news for Penridge is on page 45, is that our total cost for the budget for the services that we get goes down by $1,093.54. That's, and really, over the last 4, 5 years, that has been the trend. The program and services budget does go up a small percentage every year, but our share has been going down every year. So it's a testament to the folks at the IU. They find other ways to bring in revenue to support the program and services budget rather than laying that all back on the school district. So it's a kudos to them, and it's a thank you to them for being that and taking that initiative. So. Would you like?
I think you did a great job.
Okay.
I just to highlight what Mr. Galbert was saying, the IU takes on additional programs, like the expanding services to people in the community. They figure out other needs that are out in the community, and how can the IU meet those needs, and then how can we fund it so that we're not passing that on to the school districts. And so that's something that is really a skill over at the IU, where, I think one of the more recent things taking on certain services for adults with disabilities after they graduate, because there was a need in that area. They took on some of the early childhood services like Head Start and pre-K counts, and whenever they're taking on those things, and then they're getting that funding from the state to pay for it. So even though the budget is going up, it's going up because they're doing all these additional things and then paying for it in different ways. So, but
Yeah, the budget shows an 8.3% increase in other resource streams. So although their budget's going up 3%, they've been able to recruit more than 8% of an increase. And just to give you a sense, it is on page 33 of the report, but to give you a sense of some main initiatives that the IU has helped support Penn Ridge with, they have worked, obviously you know about the Tech PQR, and they've continued to help us this year because the Tech PQR, because of COVID, ended up being a 2-year process instead of a 1-year process for us, as well as our para-educator trainings. And so we've been able to capitalize on them for some of our support staff trainings, both at the IU as well as here on some of our in-service days. PIC, which has to do with our instructional coaches. So thank you to you that you've supported those coaches, and we currently have 6 coaches, 3 at the elementary level and 3 at the secondary level. And so they are going through formal training through the IU to meet with other coaches who have been in jobs longer to get a sense for how to do that well, as well as our CDT implementation, which is our classroom diagnostic testing to get benchmarks, to kind of get a sense for how students are growing and give teachers data on the students in front of them and how best to help them, as well as then our gifted support program, primarily looking at our secondary, our middle school and our high school gifted support program in terms of how can we do that more effectively for the students with the staffing that we have. So a lot of good work that comes out of the IU, besides just the resource they are anytime we need something, to pick up the phone and to have 13 school districts and 3 CTCs to be able to say, how are we doing this well? It's a wonderful organization.
yeah, I think other counties even comment on how well run and well organized and how united Bucks County is, and I think that's a testament to the administration at the intermediate unit, as well as our administrations in each sending school. But it's organized really well through them, and so it's definitely. I think a lot of people would love to have our Bucks County intermediate unit.
Well, the IU is run by a Penn Ridge father, so how could it not be?
Exactly. Right.
How could it not be
How could
good?
it not be a quality organization?
Exactly.
Good point. And actually, he's now got, I'm gonna butcher this because I don't have my notes in front of me, but, so now he is representing the intermediate units, nationally. He's got a seat at the table for those national conversations to help advocate for us, and he's also the president of, like we have PSBA, they have one for the Bucks County Intermediate Unit Directors, and he is now the president of, I don't know if they call him the president or the chair, but he is the head of that in the state now too. So now we've got, we've got a really important spokesperson whose communication skills are, out of this world, right? Representing us in both of those ways. So that's going to be a huge advantage for us going forward.
For sure.
Anyone have any questions
No.
or?
No, good job.
It's all good stuff.
Well, good.
Yep, very good.
No one complains when the cost isn't going up.
That's right.
All good.
I was done when Sean said it was minus 1,000
Right.
something.
It's like, all right.
Saved me the trouble of reading through the whole report too.
Yeah, this one on page 45, so I looked at it.
Yeah. So next, we will do the 2021-2022 general fund budget update.
All right, we'll have our kickoff tonight. How'd that just work a second?
There you go.
There we go. Thank you, Lord. Okay, overview, what are we gonna look at tonight? Listed there, talk about how we ended last year, the cause of the budget variance, capital projects, role of the school board in the budget, school finance 101, assumptions for future budget growth. Just to let you know that so far for the 21-22 budget, we've met with every department and principal. over the last 3 to 4 weeks. We've had 29 total meetings. And we are also working diligently on the personnel budget at this point in time. That is the largest piece of the pie is personnel budget, all our employees' salaries and benefits. So we spend a great deal of time, both the HR department and my department, going through that. We really work as a collaboration on that to make sure that we have identified all of our employees, all of our needs, and make sure that we don't also over-identify. And to make sure that we are as close as we can be. Last year, and this you saw this a little bit of this last month from the auditor when he was here. But anyways, our 1920 actuals revenues, we ended up a little short this year, $145,000, and that's odd for us. But the pandemic hit in March, and we were impacted, especially with earned income tax in the last quarter. That is where we lost. We also, the interest rates tanked very, very quickly, and it hurt us in the last quarter as far as interest earnings.
And they're still going down.
And they're still going down.
Yes, sir.
We did fine with our state and our federal revenues. Our real estate tax collections were fine last year. It was just that piece in the last quarter that hit those volatile taxes like earned income and interest earnings, those things that we were impacted by. Now on the expenditure side, we did pretty good. That's normally where we want to be, in that 1.5–2% range, but we like to be on both sides of that, so then we can add them together and have a nice number. But we ended up with about 1.5 million excess at the end of the year, which was about 1.06% of expenditures. There we go. All right. So, take a look at fund balance at the end of 1819 and 1920 as a comparison. The real change is the assigned to 2021 fiscal year. That's that 1.5 million. So what we did, if you remember, at the end of last fiscal year, we said that any surplus that we had, we would set aside in an assigned fund balance for the current fiscal year, for the year we're in now. In case we had, because we didn't know we were going COVID and so forth, for expenditures and revenues. We didn't know what we would get from state, from federal revenues, so forth, that to help us. So we set that money aside instead of putting it over into capital projects. Now the theory that we had, I'll remind you, is that when we get to the end of the current fiscal year, and if we haven't used that money, then we'll take that and we'll put it over into the capital projects fund to help fund our future capital projects. But the unassigned and the rest of them stayed pretty much the same. They go up and down a little bit with the audit. Our capital projects did drop from 21.5 to 16 million, and again, we didn't have a chance to resupply that or replenish that from last year. So that's why you see that drop. We are at our unassigned fund balance is at 6.9% of the total general fund budget of 143.8 million, and its limit is 8%. So we're right there. We have a little bit of room that we could go up, but we're pretty healthy as far as our unassigned fund balance. And the rest of the fund balances don't count towards that 8%. So you can have as much money as you want in capital projects, as much money and committed or assigned as you want for certain things, and they don't count against the district in that total percent. Okay, capital projects fund. So again, what we've done in Penridge is we've created a capital projects fund to maintain facilities and to accumulate money over years in order to maintain facilities, to do projects over, and as we look out to the 5 to 10 year horizon, is to try to fund those projects as we go, instead of borrowing dollars, bond issues, and so forth. And as we borrow money, that would create more of a stress on the general fund budget, having to make debt service payments
principal and interest. So what our theory allows us to not raise taxes, be able to maintain our general fund budget, maintain our services, use our surpluses to fund the capital projects, and to fund to do the capital projects in a responsible manner that we maintain those funding levels. Okay.
So just to jump back to your point from the last slide, just to make the counterpoint, you said we could go up a little bit to get to 8%. We could also go down a little bit to get to 5, because the recommended range is 5 to 8. So we have that extra money built in there. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Sure. So our normal, other than last year, normally we would put between $4 to $5 million a year into the capital projects fund. Our excess revenues over budget are under expenditures, spending less than the budget. Usually it gets between $4 and $5 million. If we get back into that method, that perhaps would provide us just about $40 million for major capital projects over the next 4 or 5 years. So the next slide is the last 4 or 5 years of the actual history in the capital projects fund. Our beginning fund balance, what we spent each year, earnings from interest, and then what our transfers in. And you can see our transfers in have been 8 million, just under 5 million, just under 4 million, and just over 5 million. So, our history is that we're able to do that, to fund that capital projects fund with that $4 to $5 million a year. And again, in the end of 1920, we didn't transfer in. The 2021, the 1.8 million, that's money that we've spent already this year. That was last year's, last summer's projects. The piece that went into July and August and September that didn't get spent before. So capital projects is always always interesting because it always happens in the summertime, and you always end up splitting your costs. Part of it happened here, so you have to recognize your costs in the fiscal year that they happened in, and so you end up splitting it. So it makes it a little hard. But anyway, the important part about this slide is 14.2 million is the number we have moving into next summer for capital projects. Did it again.
Get it to cooperate.
There. Okay. So the next slide shows our 21-22 forecast. So again, we start with 14.2 million. We talked about tonight $7.7 million as a target for this coming summer. We believe that if all goes well the rest of this year, we are able to take that 1.5 million that we just talked about, maybe we have a little bit of extra, another $500,000 that we can replenish 2 million this summer. Then going forward, if we forecast 6 million the next summer, we have perhaps 1.5 million. The next couple of years are going to be the harder ones until we get to the debt drop off in 24, 25. And hopefully by then we're back into full steam where we're able to really fund our capital projects with a decent surplus of revenues and a decent amount from the debt drop off in 24, 25 and 25, 26, and then hopefully that continues. So, and if we can squeak our way through the next few years and get to the debt drop off. We'll be in pretty fine shape. So.
And that 39.7, that 40 million, just to give you a sense of where that number comes from. So it's that very first number, right? We're currently at 14.2 million. That's today. That's our current fund balance. And then the transfer from general fund, and that's that 25 million across the bottom. That are the projections in terms of money that could be put back into the capital fund at the end of the year. You can see in the last 2 years it goes up dramatically, and those are the debt drop-off years. And so there's a big step into 24, 25, and then an even bigger step into 25, 26 and beyond, which is one of the reasons why we're trying to focus on that 5-year planning. Because if we get to a 5-year planning model that we kind of think about these 5 summers, we are in a much stronger financial shape even than we are currently, because the debt then gets to the point where it's just the tech school debt, which is a relatively minor debt compared to some of the others that we've had, right? And so that's that $40 million, that 39.7, but as Mrs. Baines-Clemens said, there are other avenues, right? You could choose to do a little more than that, or you could choose to do a little less than that in terms of how the income comes out. But that kind of gives you a target for what the next 5 summers will look like from a capital standpoint.
And one of the things that I think is important to take into account, and obviously, as we learned in facilities, it wasn't all working out so pretty, but with there being potential for saving a lot of money to doing projects now rather than waiting until that debt drop, we know that that debt drop is happening. It's guaranteed. It's not a an unknown or something that isn't solidly going to happen. So I don't think it would be unreasonable if we're trying to plan accordingly based on priorities, and if we can save millions of dollars by doing some projects now as opposed to waiting 3 years and then paying that hike. It might be worth it to look at the fact that we could have our fund balance at 5%, and that would give us $7 million because right now we're closer to the 8%, and so we know that we can replenish that when that debt drop happens. We can easily go right back up to 8%, and 5% is plenty of money when you're talking about a 3-year time frame. The other thing I would
And if you have a building burned down.
the other thing, well, you also have insurance, but the other thing that I think we should kind of look at too is we have that other committed fund that has $6 million, and we have talked about the fact that you can't use that money for what it was intended for, because it's going to it's something that's going to happen. Like you can't plug in money for an increase, because next year that increase is going to be there plus another increase. And so we talked about that you can't actually use that money for that. But you know what you can use for that purpose? And just it's for the we had a fund that was supposed to be for PSERS, right? And so PSERS, when PSERS goes up, it goes up, and then the year after that it goes up. And so if you plug money into 1 year, the next year you're eating the cost of the increase for that prior year plus the following year. So each year, you'd be then having a huge jump if you're just putting a chunk of change in 1 year. But, so that's why it doesn't really make sense to use it for that purpose. But actually planning the increase of PSERS into the debt drop makes perfect sense, because that is something that will happen from then on out, instead of a set amount of $6 million that once you use it, it's gone. So, that's money that's kind of just sitting in an account with no purpose, and the debt drop makes much more sense to plan into PSERS, because that will happen. That drop happens indefinitely. It's not something that happens for 1 year. Bill, you're scratching your head. Am I not clear?
I'm scratching an itch. I'm not.
Okay, I thought it was. What is she talking about?
No. I actually had an itch. It's real.
All right. Just checking. I thought
The
you were
pen was
sending me a signal.
convenient.
So anyway, I was just thinking that that's something that we could repurpose and then, move that intent to a different.
But do we know enough about the movement of PSERS at this point? To, do we know do we have any feeling which way it's moving? Is it good, other than up, is it up or is it up?
That slide's coming. It's slower, but it's still up for a couple more years.
Yeah.
Right, but Bill,
So-
you can't throw money at it 1 year, because then the next year, you're doubling your increase then. Say you say it's a $2 million increase this year,
Right.
so you put $2 million towards it. Well, now next year it goes up another $2 million, well now you've got to make up that $4 million. And so that's why we've talked about that it doesn't make sense to use a fund like that to plug something like that, because it's not a one-time expense.
But we've left it there as a cushion, right?
Well, no, it's been left there because the recommendation from administration has been, don't use it for that purpose, I think it was one of those things where that money was there at a prior administration, and then philosophies were a little bit different in the newer administration. And so that money just sits there. But the recommendation from Mr. Dahlberg has always been, not to use that to plug a one-year hole, because it is a continuous increase, and then you're building on that the following year. So, it might make sense to utilize that and plan it into the debt drop. Just a thought as we're talking about how much money to plan into our 5-year plan and where.
Thank you. All right, role of the school board and the budget. Kind of change gears a little bit here. All right. So part of your responsibilities as a school board is to pass a budget for every fiscal year. The budget, within the budget, we collect revenues, we make expenditures, we execute related responsibilities, we make numerous other decisions in the interest of providing a sound program of education for the kids. So everything starts with from a finance standpoint, is with the budget. One of my most important duties is to develop a budget and in coordination with Dr. Bolton, submit that budget to Dr. Bolton, and one of his key responsibilities as a superintendent under the school code is to provide you, the school board, with a budget. And then one of your most important jobs to do as a school board is to set the budget in place, because that is our roadmap for the year. And while you're doing that, the board has to, you have a variety of things and competing interests that you have to choose between when you put a budget in place as the school board. And it comes down to what are the things the school board wants versus what can our community afford, because our community pays the vast majority of our budget funded through local taxes. So whereas some school districts in the state, maybe that percentage is 50-50 between state and locals, ours is more 80% local revenue. So our taxpayers really carry the weight of our budget. So again, adopting the budget is one of your most important functions as a school board. It is your opportunity as a school board to directly influence the educational environment in the school district. So the budget, these are some points of what the budget does. Identifies where the money comes from that the district uses. It establishes the relationships between costs and programs. Describes costs associated with building maintenance, facility upgrades, so forth. Communicates our financial needs to our community and our businesses within our community. Serves as the overview of our educational system. Educates our staff about the interrelationships of programs and costs and specific activities. It aids in evaluating plan changes and progress towards completion. Increases the public and business awareness and the community confidence in our school district by providing a sound budget. And it demonstrates and supports orderly planning and action by the board and by the administration. And it helps communicate to our taxpayers what's their return on their investment. What are they getting for the taxes they pay? And our budget, if done right, communicates those things. And I think that we do a fine job budgeting here in this district. So the budget is an expression of the values that we have in educating our kids in Penridge. So a little school finance, my specialty, if I have one, is finance.
They need to record this and put this on PSBA. You know how they have those trainings?
There you go.
We gotta submit this.
We have a
video.
training module for you.
There's guys out there that are much smoother at this than I am. I have to tell you.
Well, having watched some of them, I don't know that I agree on that, on all of them, but.
I appreciate that. Okay, so budgeting, again, it's required by state law. It's the most important, I will say, it's the most important thing you do as a school board. Other administrators would maybe think that their areas are more important, but I think that my area is most important. Because we don't do anything without that budget in place.
That's right.
If it's not there on July 1, we're in trouble. So it's two parts to the budget. There's the expenditure side, the expense side of the budget. You're investing in plans and programs and good things for kids. And then the other side is the financing plan. How do we pay for all those good things that we do for kids here in Penridge? So when we look at our finances, our expenditure side, the state requires us to break our expenses down into these major 5 buckets that we call them. So instruction, that's all of our expenditures for the classroom. Support services, that would be all of our expenditures for both instructional and non-instructional support. So anything that directly supports the classroom, either instructionally or non-instructionally. And then you get into non-instructional services, so that's your sports and your activities, those type of things, your after-school stuff. Things that don't have a direct impact to the education of the child in the classroom, but are very important to our community and our kids here in the district. The next one is the capital outlay, so anything that we do with facility structure, buildings, things like that. All of our expenditures and capital projects would fall under capital outlay. And then other financial uses, really, that's our debt service payments, our principal and interest, any budgetary reserve that we might have that goes under other financial uses. So our instructional costs, that's where we want to spend most of our money. We spend 62% of our dollars directly in the classroom in instruction. So it's either regular instruction, special ed instruction, STEM, those type of things. Direct instruction to the kids. 62% of our expenditures go to the classroom.
Well, and just to pause on that real quick, when you talk about what we're paying as a formula for the charter schools, and you look at how much money we're putting into our instruction with the equipment in STEM, all of the different opportunities that kids have here, and when you're sending them to that other school and it's not based on their actual costs, it's based on ours, they're not offering those same things. So we're essentially paying them a percentage for services we're offering that they're not even offering, which I think is a point we didn't even touch on before. I'm sure we could make our points, 100 pages long, but we certainly do put a lot into instruction and having more opportunities for more kids. So.
And all of our costs really, with the exception of federal costs and the other financial uses, go into that formula for paying charter schools. And they're like Mrs. Vance Clemens just said, a lot of that stuff they don't do. But those expenditures we make goes into that state calculation to create that, or to come out with that charter school tuition fee. So this is a very good point. Thank you. The next part is we have our 5 buckets, and then within those 5 buckets, we need to break all of our expenditures down further. And these, again, they're all state required, and every school district does these same things. So we break down our expenditures into salaries and benefits, contracted services, property services, so that would be repairs and maintenance, other purchase services, our supplies and our textbooks, our equipment, other, which is a catch-all, and then debt. And salaries and benefits, as I told you, was the biggest part of our budget. It's 72% of all of our expenditures go into salary and benefit costs. So as a school board, there are certain things you can control and certain things that you can't control in order to try to rein in costs. What you can control are staffing sizes, how many employees you have, your class size, which again then impacts how many teachers you have, your facilities, what repairs, what maintenance we do to our facilities, what facilities we have, how new are they, how old are they, what upgrades we do to them, putting in STEM rooms, things like that. The next thing is collective bargaining contracts. The board has a say at those as you negotiate contracts. And then the last thing is any non-state mandated programs that the district has. Those programs, they're not mandated, so they can be eliminated if you need to save money. But a lot of those are, again, true loved programs by our families and our kids, and it's, you know, they might not be mandated, but they mean a lot to our community and our kids. Mhm.
Well, and to your point about what's controllable for us, some of it though isn't completely controllable, right? Because we can't control how many kids register here. If you have all these extra kids that move into the district, then you have to expand buildings and all of, to accommodate them, expand transportation, buy more buses, hire more staff, all of those things, we have to do that, where a charter school can say, nope, we're capped, we're out of room, right? And so that's another difference where, you can plan in that kind of a place where you don't really have that flexibility in public school.
And there are some, and I should have pointed out, there is some staffing that you can't control, special ed. When you hit a state cap on a class, in the law, there's a cap on the number of kids that can be in a class, and you get more, you gotta add. So there are some staffings that you don't
Because
control.
there's quotas per student.
Quotas.
It's still, you still have that kind
Oh,
of
yeah.
limited under special
I got
ed and mandated.
Yep.
If everybody remembers that IU sent us that huge document about all the different mandated programs and how insane, they have all these mandates but don't fund them.
Yeah. Some things that you really can't control, these are mandated upon the school board to pay. The PSERS rate each year has been going up. Charter school tuition, again, that's a state formula that we can't get around. We're lobbying like crazy, but I'm trying to get relief there. Our geographic location, our cost of where we live, something you don't have any control over. And then again, mandated programs like special education and English language development are things that you have to have, and you can't control them, because if you get 25 kids that need that service, you provide the 25 kids. So looking at the revenue side, there's three major areas: the local revenue, state revenue, and federal revenue. In this year's budget, 108 million of our 143 comes from our local revenue sources. 80 million of that comes from our real estate taxes. So our real estate taxes is our major driver. The second major driver is our earned income tax. It's about $18 million of revenue each year. Our state revenues is about $34 million, and probably about 12 million of that is the state share of Social Security and retirement costs. Another 10 million or so is our basic ed funding. Then special ed funding and transportation funding are the other major sources there. And then finally, federal revenue. This year it's about $825,000 that we budgeted. That's usually about what we have, but we've seen an increase in that. We have some ESSERS and some ESSERS money, some CARES Act money that came from the federal government that's really helped us this year plug some holes. And also we have ESSERS 2 money that's on its way. And we're going to use that in next year's budget, and hopefully the year after that's budget. We have 3 years to spend that money. We're going to use that to help us bridge some gaps and plug some holes through this COVID crisis that we're in, and hopefully ease the pain a little bit. So we're going to strategically use those federal dollars in a way that helps us and get through instead of willy-nillying it. So we have a plan. We want you to know we have a plan. What do we do if we need more money? The Act 1 index limit, we could file for exceptions and try to get a bigger tax increase if we had to, if we needed that. And then bond financing for construction projects. Those are really our ways to get money if we needed it in a pinch. So what impacts the revenues? So zoning of tax parcels has an impact on our local real estate tax collections, trends in assessed values of real estate. We're working with a 1970s assessment in Bucks County. 1972 assessment. So, yeah, it's
I now remember that, Bob.
makes for some real difficult challenges for the assessment office in coming up with values of properties when in 2021 you're dealing with 1972 numbers. So,
And the step formula.
and the step formula, yeah.
But it should be indicated that the county does do a reassessment after each parcel is sold. So if you look at certain neighborhoods, you'll see a disparity in actual real estate costs where someone has held on their house for 30 years and someone has bought the house within the last 10 years. There is a major difference in taxes being collected.
Sure.
So that the county does address that issue, but to do a reassessment on the whole county is millions upon millions of dollars to do that. So they really resisted in spending those dollars.
Well, but to your point, I mean, it's so uneven then, right? The way that they do it, because it's, if you sell your house, if you put an addition on your house, you know, if you build new construction, then you're gonna have much higher rates than people who aren't doing those things. And so you can have the same exact house, to his point, next door to each other, and one could be paying insanely higher taxes than the other one right next door, exactly the same house, just based on those factors. So it's just, it's not necessarily a, you know, I guess they figure, well, you're doing the addition or you're buying the house or whatever, so it's grandfathering in. I mean, maybe they think that it somehow also helps seniors who stayed in their houses for that long, so, you know, but I don't know that that's always the case.
Right, right. After you get past the real estate tax, our other tax generating capacity really is our earned income tax. But it is volatile, and we witnessed a little bit of that this spring. We've really been lucky with real nice growth in our earned income tax since I've been here. Growth that we could really count on. We did take that little bit of a hit, but it is regenerating nicely, coming back. So, practical and legal limits on rates of taxation. You know, we are limited to how much real estate taxes we can increase in a year. So we are hamstrung by Act 1. State subsidies. You know, what will come our way in any given year is crystal ball, for sure. Federal and state grants, and prior year funds or fund balance. So those are our revenue factors really that impact us. So just quickly, the different funds that we have in the district. The general fund is the general operating budget you pass each year. That's the general fund is. We have a healthcare fund where we fund our self-funded healthcare program through. We have the capital projects fund. You guys are well aware of that. We have our food service fund that runs independently of the general fund. We have a student activity fund where we are the fiduciary for all the kids' activities, their monies. We hold those monies for them. And again, then we have our debt service fund, and really this fund is just a paper fund where debt service payments go through. When they leave the general fund, they go through a debt service fund and pay the bondholders off, interest and principal. So. There we go. So fund balance. What is fund balance? It basically is the difference between revenues and expenditures. We have a beginning fund balance. We add our revenues for the year, subtract our expenditures, and if the revenues are more than expenditures, fund balance goes up. It's not a recurring source of revenue. We use it for one-time investments. And that's why we, move that money to the capital projects fund, because we use it for that capital project, and then if we get more money, we can do another capital project, but we don't use it for things that we have to pay for the same thing over and over again each year. So we wouldn't want to take our fund balance and use that to pay for 5 new teachers, because eventually that money goes away, and then there's no fund, there's no recurring revenue there to pay for that. Okay, the different types of fund balance. So it starts at the top, and the higher up it is, the more controlled it is. It starts with a non-spendable fund balance, and that's really the value of your inventories, prepaid items, comes out in the financial statements, and is the most constrained. Then there's the restricted fund balance, something that's imposed by law or externally imposed. I really have never experienced one of those. Committed fund balance, assigned fund balance, and unassigned fund balance. As you come down further, there's no constraint. We took that $1.5 million and we assigned that, so that's where that's sitting. And again, there's an 8% limit, and the further you come down, the more board has the control over those dollars. And yeah, again, the fund balance limits, we know we are capped at 8% each year for fund balance. Districts with smaller budgets can go up to 12%. That Act 1 base this year for 21-22 is 3%. We did not file for exceptions, so our allowable tax increase would be 3%. And estimated additional revenue would be about $2.5 million is what a 3% tax increase would generate based on our current total assessed value. And here are the budget assumptions we're working under when we're developing that personnel budget this year. 21-22 is the budget you're working on. Administration or the Act 93 agreement has 2.5% increases in that. It's been 2.5 for the life of that agreement. I think that's 5 years. This is the 21-22 will be the last year of that Act 93 agreement. Miscellaneous is done each year, and generally that follows the Act 93 agreement for the group of miscellaneous folks. And that's really anyone that's not an administrator and doesn't fall into one of the contracts, as our miscellaneous group of employees. Teaching, this year is a 2.46% gross, and then the support staff this year is 2.01% gross. And those contracts, teachers ends in 22-23, and the support goes through 23-24. So we're in pretty good shape right now as far as our contracts. We do have that Act 93 coming up that the board will have to take care of that one. But we are set for the major contracts that are in place for a few years yet.
And just to point out, I think everybody knows, but each of the contracts averages 2.5% increase a year, so that keeps everyone on the same page. So it may look different from year to year, but the average over the life of each individual contract that was settled, the idea is to be 2.5% average when you divide it up by the number of years. And that fluctuates a little bit from year to year because of whether or not there's step in there, and so trying to make those numbers work. So there's a lot of that goes into it, and trying to even out the schedule and things like that.
How much is between each step and
Right.
on the scale and stuff. Yep, absolutely. So, and then the last slide is just to look at Peasers. So this year we're at 34.51%. We are going to 34.94% in next year's budget, which over here will cost us about $281,000 without any salary increase. So if we had same salaries as we have this year, just that increase is about $281,000 for Peasers still. And the current numbers the current projections that we have from Peasers goes out 5 years, and it's 38.17% is the last projections that they put out. Now, they haven't put they put that projection out last December, December 19th. They did not put out a projection in December 20 yet, or didn't put it out in December 20. They usually put a projection out when they certify the rate in December, but they didn't update their 19 projection. So we're still at 38.17. And this after that, going out there and dropping down is from a old projection that was shared with me from Dave Mattis when he was at Central Bucks. So right now, Peasers is only going out 5 years with their projection. So, but I've always kind of let that there. I want to see how that's
I was going to ask you if that had moved over time.
Yeah. Yep. It certainly is moving over time. So, well,
Well, and they keep saying, it's leveling off, it's leveling off, it's leveling off, and then it keeps,
yeah.
poking up a little bit.
So all the business managers in the state are having little bets about whether it'll hit 40 or not. That's what everybody's like. You think it'll hit 40? You think it'll hit 40? I'm like, I don't know. But yeah. So that's the big. So that's Peasers. That's
I'll
where
take out some.
So, but that's everything I have. Unless you guys have questions.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Nice tutorial.
Sorry for taking so long.
No, it's
great.
That's quite all right.
Important information.
I get windy, but
Awesome.
You had mentioned how we do a great job and how you do a great job with this, with our budget and all of our finances. And we do such a great job that Mr. Dahlberg sat in on a meeting the other day with other districts, I'll just say that. And it was, they couldn't believe how good of a job we're doing. In fact, they were questioning it, so I had to invite them to a finance committee meeting so they can see how great our finances are.
oh boy. No pressure at all.
No, none.
So,
So next month we will have our first look at 21-22 numbers.
All right.
Good.
We'll be ready to take a look.
does anyone else have any questions or comments about this before you move?
No, looks good.
No,
All right.
thank you. How do I get my employer to contribute 38% to my retirement?
Yeah, let's talk to my dad.
See, this one right here was something back in 02, 03. It was actually, it's really broken into two parts. One part goes to the Peasers, to the retirement part, and then there's a very small part that goes to the bill to pay for retirees' health insurance.
Okay.
Because they give, I think it's $100 a month. Peasers use $100 a month towards retirees' health insurance. And the rate they had that year was actually a negative rate for the Peasers fund itself. It was just money to pay for the $100 of health insurance. And that happened whenever the state really messed with the funding system.
I was going to say, all right,
Yeah.
something happened there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the recession hit. And
Yeah.
They must have been making good money leading up to the recession.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
And they changed the benefits from a 2% multiplier to 2.5. That was under Governor Ridge right before he went out.
Okay. Yeah.
So there were a lot of this thing has been driven by politics to no end.
Imagine
And
it.
that's why we're,
Understated.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
Understated.
All right. Thank you.
you all.
So I think the next are the RFPs.
Yep.
Yeah, so we are ready to go out for our RFPs and bids for our 21-22 supplies. We're just looking for permission to advertise for those. We have our music instruments and equipment. We do each year. Each year we do art supplies, technology education equipment and supplies, transportation supplies, which is usually our brakes, our engine, transmissions, and parts, our batteries for the buses. We get our tires under the BCIU bid, the
Okay.
Bucks County Intermediate Unit bid. So under tech ed, we have our metal shops, our wood shops, our lumber, art, music instruments, we covered those. So those are the type of things. So these are the things that we can't, or we aren't normally able to buy under the joint purchasing. These are maybe specialty type items. We get as much of that as we can through those joint purchasing councils and so forth. But there's some things we just need to go out and do our own bidding for.
I'm good.
Anyone have any,
Good.
everybody good with moving this on to?
Yep. Yeah, let's move.
All right, sounds good. Well then, brings us to the end. One thing I'll just note here, we didn't make this an agenda item because there really isn't any change to it, but the articles of agreement from the tech school is gonna be coming back to all of you. I sent you all an email with the changes, but essentially you're gonna be voting on almost the exact same thing you voted on last time. The only substantive change is we took out the rotation change that was in there that would basically change how the leadership over there and the superintendent rotated to make sure that they didn't match up between districts. Since that was the part that Palisades had the most concerns about, we removed that change, so that would basically stay exactly how it is now. And all the other changes that were proposed are going to stay the same in there. There were some wording changes, which you'll see in the red line, but all of those wording changes were just to clarify the language to make sure that it can't be misunderstood, not to actually change any content. It does sound like it's going to have support this time to go through, which is a good thing. I think one of the things we're hearing from the business administrators too was, we're kind of talking between board members, it's helpful to know, to have some stability as far as this formula going forward, because right now, no one can plan, because just even one of the examples that came up is we may have to, something may need to happen with the roof, and we'll know more next month as far as what the proposed solution is. But that's the big debate. If you look at how this formula has been utilized over time and go with the interpretation as it's been done, that would not count as a capital project that goes under the STEP formula. But if you look at the actual language in the Articles of Agreement, it should, because it falls under the 400s category. And so then you end up in that big debate between all three districts about should it or shouldn't it go under this formula or that formula. And I think that the understanding from some of the more veteran board members over there has been that their interpretation of this is, it should be used when we are taking on debt. Because if you are taking on debt and you're paying that off for 10 years, 15 years, they saw it being more beneficial to use the STEP formula than using enrollment, even though it's a 5-year average enrollment. Anyway, since it only applies to that one, since it really applies to all of these things, but they believed it only applied to one portion, which really there's no plans of ever, of doing anytime soon. The only time that would even apply in the way that they wanted it to apply would be if all three districts decided, hey, we're going to do a big project that's millions of dollars, and we're going to take out bonds to be able to pay for it. And that's not something that is actually even feasible or coming down the pike. And there's a lot of language issues in there that really just need to be fixed. So I'm hopeful that this is going to go through. So this will hopefully appear on our next board meeting for a vote. I'm not sure how the other two districts' board meetings fall, but it will be on the JOC agenda next week, which is before our board meeting. So we might as well vote on it, and then hopefully we'll have some predictability for that tech budget going forward, because it'll all go under that one formula. And then the discussions will start about, predicting long-term capital projects. Site Logic was brought in over there to develop a long-term plan for the facilities, and that can start to give us some predictability as far as, what other expenses are coming down the pike, and how much is it going to cost, and how are we going to pay for it and plan for it, and do we set up a separate account over time so it's not something that hits us all one year. So those conversations will now be a lot easier because you have some flexibility to move the funds around where you didn't before because you had that lingering formula issue where you couldn't move money from one area if that money was collected through the other formula, right? So, so hopefully that gets fixed and that'll be on our next agenda. So the next Finance Committee meeting is scheduled for March 8th, and we are back to public comment. Do we have any public comment?
The only public comment is from the Dalbert family in Percy, who said, "I thought the presentation was really awesome. Great job, Mr. Dalbert."
That has to be my son.
Well, either that or I made it up. One of the other. We'll never know. Nice job, Mr. Dalbert.
Thank you.
Ms. Cooper, if you'd let us know when we're off, please.